Howard, do you want a refill? Asked James, looking up at me from the minibar. Sure, I could use a refill, I replied, already slurring a little. Damn, it's still only 30 in the afternoon and I'm already slurring my words. Whatever. It had been 6 months since James's daughter's wedding. Madison was a beautiful bride, as was her partner, Sarah. I still remember that night. Well, most of it anyway, because I'd had a lot to drink. I remember James walking her down the aisle and thinking of his little girl, Clarissa, sad that he never got to walk her down the aisle. Time had not healed my wounds, only dulled them a little. We were sitting in the main salon of my yacht purgatory. I'm pretty sure I'd already had at least 3 of his famous beach pineapple drinks and was quickly heading towards full intoxication, as I should be. So how are things going with you and Tanya? I asked, redirecting my thoughts. Great, I think. We're actually really well suited for each other, our professions aside. Honestly, if I'd met her when I was 20, we'd be together instead of Caitlin and I. That's great, my friend. But she would have been what for? I roared loudly, unable to contain my laughter. James nodded with a thoughtful look. Right. So how's retirement treating you? Tired of lazing around on your little yacht yet? Small? I asked, somewhat indignant. It's a yacht over 140 feet long, sir. James immediately started laughing, that laugh that comes from deep in your stomach and nearly flipped him in two. Damn it. He caught me. Again. Would he never get tired of getting a reaction out of me? I pulled myself together and said, Well played, sir, and then hiccuped. Shall we have a drink now? It took James a moment to get his laughter under control. Then he brought me a tall glass with more of that wonderful juice mixture in it. The thought flashed through my mind that this stuff might be worth the money. The light bulb hadn't come on yet, but the filament was already starting to heat up. At that moment, there was a sound outside. James jumped up and walked over to the sliding back door. That must be Tanya. She said she'd join us after the run into town. And he stepped out and I heard them whisper their declarations of love to each other before entering the parlor, holding hands. It was almost disgusting how in love they seemed. I was happy for them, but I couldn't help but feel bitter too. He said, James, when the hell are you going to put a ring on her? I asked, clearly riddled with social lubrication. Tanya blushed slightly, and James just smiled. Perhaps I should tone it down, since it was still only noon. That, sir, is none of your business, but she's worth the wait, he replied with a wide grin. Tanya glowed at his words and hugged his arm tightly. The two of them continued to puzzle me, but it didn't really matter. I was just glad my buddy was happy. I remembered what it felt like to be happy. Once upon a time, I had a family that loved me too, or so I thought. Now all I had were these clowns. If only they knew. James, damn it, give me a drink, I barked. Hold your horses, old man. He laughed back, by then used to my antics. I just hummed and walked towards him. Well, waddling would be a better description. Anyway, I made it to the bar and snatched my drink from him. I tipped it back and set the glass back down, enjoying the way it burned my throat. I don't think I've ever heard how you two met, Tanya remarked. I mean, I met James after you, so you both know how it happened. Well, Tanya, you see, I began. This old man came up to me at the bar and hit on me, James added. I felt an angry heat flare up on my cheeks until I realized he was mocking me again. I'm going to kill him someday. Damn you, James. At that moment he laughed, and a smirk appeared on Tanya's beautiful face. The heat faded away as I looked at her. When the laughter subsided, I continued. Like I said, we met right after he arrived, in that resort lounge. I told him about my problems at the time, and he ended up laughing at the top of his lungs, James added indignantly. Oh, I'm sure I would have laughed too, Tanya replied, smirking again. Rolling my eyes, I continued. So, after he told me the heartwarming story, I gave him the phone number of someone who would help him find a place to live. He moved To, uh, that little boat, I said, suddenly confused about what I was talking about. I really needed to drink less. I must have been so damn tired because I passed out. Next chapter. The sun rose on the horizon and the light woke me up. My head hurt, my stomach felt like a grenade had exploded, and my back hurt from sleeping on the couch again. I really needed to drink less. Somehow I made it to my quarters and immediately stripped down to take a shower. The hot water began to work like tonic magic on me as I washed. Drying myself off, I brushed my teeth, popped a couple of Advil pills, and downed a glass of water. Shaking my head, I looked in the mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. I looked more tired than I had ever looked before. My demons were catching up with me. At that moment, I heard some noise on the aft deck. Naturally, I put on my sandals and went to see who was there. "Good morning, Howard!" shouted James. I flinched, grabbing my head. "Damn, man, keep it down, okay?" He just smiled and walked towards me. I turned and waved for him to follow me into the house. We walked to the parlor and sat on the couches next to each other. I groaned as my stomach rumbled loudly. "Huh? You haven't eaten yet?" asked James. "Actually, just woke up." I couldn't lie to him, so why bother? "What made you get up so early?" "Besides making sure you were still alive? Oh, and it's almost noon. I wouldn't call it early," he teased me. I hated him. "Oh, don't look at me like that. You know I'm just messing with you," James said. "In all seriousness, I just saw something that made me think of you, so I came over right now to talk about what I was thinking about." I just threw him a "hurry the fuck up" kind of look. "Our favorite hangout is for sale," he added. This was news to me. We used to frequent the same place on the beach, and we often ate light bar food and drank there. James and I often good-naturedly grumbled about the elderly owner and his wife. They ran the place together, but for them, it was more just a semi-retirement occupation than an income. It was my favorite place to spend time, aside from my yacht. Was all I was capable of. "Howard, I think we should buy it. We could share it as equal partners. What do you say?" "I think I'll go back to bed." "Seriously, I don't want it to close, and this gives us a chance to make it the way we like it," he exclaimed. "James, what the hell do we know about running a pub?" James didn't answer immediately. He stood up and left the saloon, returning with a sandwich on a plate and a bottle of water. He handed me 2 more Advil and water. I took the pills, chugged them with water, and picked up the plate. "You really should hire people to help you run this big beast," he commented. "Your galley is a mess." He laughed, reveling in his own pun. He's still a big dumbass. I just groaned at this misplaced humor, but had to agree that a little staffing wouldn't hurt at the moment. For now, I shelved the idea for later. Right now, he was talking about us buying a bar together. What the hell, why not? "Okay, James, let's do it," I said. For some reason, he was immensely happy, and I wasn't going to stop him from enjoying the moment. When he stopped acting like a little schoolgirl before prom, he pulled out his cell phone and tapped the screen. After a few seconds, he got the answer he was hoping for. "So Tanya just told them we'd like to buy it," he announced. I was shocked. "What? You left it there on your way here? Damn, dude, what's the rush?" James ignored my grumbling and continued. "We need to start planning your big day." "We definitely won't be celebrating my coming of age." "No, we will. You're one of my closest friends, Howard, and there's no way I'm letting you drink an entire bottle of 18-year-old scotch by yourself." Damn. He knew my 70th birthday plan. I hated him. How the hell did I get so old? Next chapter, June 1967. I was 20 years old and spending summers at our family cabin on the lake shore. I was moonlighting as a lifeguard at a local church camp, just to have something to do for fun. My parents were wealthy, so I didn't have to worry about money. My father had gotten rich in oil by discovering a huge oil field under his parents' property. Not that I was raised with a silver spoon, but by the time I was in middle school, he had already made his fortune and then some. The time I spent at camp was great, although it allowed me to be a little irresponsible. I just enjoyed the summer as any other young red-blooded American male would. The days were filled with sun, water, and girls. The evenings were filled with campfires, beer, and good friends. I really miss those easy times. That summer, I met the woman of my dreams. Her name was Ellen, and she was just an angel. She worked at a camp too, one of the counselors for the kids. Every week, we had a new batch of kids to entertain. That summer, we had a fairy tale romance. A whirlwind escapade of warm summer nights spent on the beach under a moonlit sky. She understood me in a way no one had before. She teased me that I was rich and that I made all the ladies swoon. I told her she was making it all up, but needless to say, I was delighted. We had spent as many years together as we could and weren't looking forward to going back to school in the fall. We would be apart, and there wasn't much we could do about it. We promised we would wait for each other, and we waited. Summer and vacations were too short, but we made the most of our time together. She truly was my better half. After graduation, I proposed to her, and she said yes with misty eyes. To this day, I don't know what she saw in me, but in that moment, I was grateful for it. Years later, I wished I hadn't remembered it. My parents helped us with the down payment on our first house, and while they were still loaded, we had to find our own way. My father wasn't the type to just hand out money. In his opinion, every man or woman should earn their own. I had a lot of respect for my father. We were on our way to our dream. Ellen became pregnant and gave birth to our beautiful baby girl, Clarissa. She became the second angel in my life, and we adored her. Everything was good. Ellen stayed home with the baby, quitting her job as a telephone switchboard operator. We discussed it, and at this point, she just wanted to stay home with our girl. I supported her no matter what she decided. We also talked about having more children, but it never seemed to happen. We were happy, and life was good for what seemed like a very long time. When Clarissa was about 10 years old, I was promoted to head of the local office of my company. I was working as a middle manager at an auto parts plant, one of several throughout the state. With the promotion, I got a new office and even a secretary. True, she turned out to be more of an assistant, but the title, administrative assistant, was not yet widely used. Her name was Candace, and she was a red fox. She was married, no children at home, and her husband worked on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. She often joked about her husband, the gruff Kyle, and his work schedule. He would be gone for weeks at a time, and when he was home, she would tell me about their active life. Meanwhile, at home, Ellen and I were doing well, but we never got back to the passion we had before Clarissa came along. "We should go on a date tonight," I said to Ellen one Friday night. "Oh, Howie, what about Clarissa?" I really liked it when she called me Howie. "Well, can't we get a babysitter or something? Can't your parents watch her overnight?" "On such short notice? Can't we wait until she goes to bed and watch a movie or something?" That was my life. It was good, but at the same time it seemed stale. I felt the need to be more alive, to enjoy life to the fullest. The following Monday, over a cup of coffee, I told Candace about my disappointing weekend. "I just don't get it. We used to have such a great life, and now it's like a chore for her," I lamented. Friday night, Kyle and I had a big fight about his work schedule. I want him around more often, even if it means we have to take a pay cut. "But he doesn't want to hear about it," she replied. "It's been really chilly in our house all weekend." "Sorry to hear that," I replied, not knowing what else to say. We continued our office romance for almost 2 years before it all fell apart. That was Wednesday, and I'll never forget it. I called Ellen in the morning, telling her I'd be an hour late, but I'd be there in time for lunch. She had been tired a lot lately, and I advised her to go to the doctor. She said she had to be home in time to make dinner, and I would ask her about the visit when I got there. But I never had that opportunity. It was about 5 o'clock and my door was closed again. Candace was lying with me when my wife burst into the room. There was a confused look on her face for a second, and then all hell broke loose. Candace jumped up, panicked, and ran for the door. Ellen only threw me a strange look. The pain in her eyes at that moment nearly killed me. There was nothing I could say or do to return the pain I had caused her. Today, Ellen was holding some papers that had fallen to the floor. She turned and silently walked out without saying a word. I walked over to the papers and found that they were some forms from the doctor's office. I couldn't understand what they meant, but I couldn't help but notice the word biopsy written and circled on the page. Life became very hard, and there was no more joy in our home. Ellen was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and she didn't want to touch me. We argued for a while, but eventually she just gave up. She lost the will to fight, and it was my fault. I tried to reason with her, even begging her to kick me out if that was what it took to get her into treatment. Nothing I could say to her could bring back her spark. My selfish actions led to this, and she died a few months after that horrible Wednesday afternoon. My daughter didn't know all the details, but she knew that I had cheated, causing her mother a lot of pain. She was furious at me for hurting Ellen, and when cancer took her away from us, I lost my little girl. She and I talked to each other, but only when necessary. She looked depressed all the time, and no amount of coaxing from me helped her. That's how we lived together until she graduated from high school. She packed up and left the first week of summer while I was at work. Next chapter. I haven't spoken to my daughter since she left. I eventually tracked her down. It took several private investigators and almost 2 years of time. When I found her, she was living in California with her then fiancé, Glenn. The private investigator's report said he was a nice guy, working in the movie industry on some prop building crew. "Earth to Howard!" James shouted. I snapped out of my reverie, shocked that I'd been so distracted. James looked at me impatiently, tapping his foot. "I asked you if you could join me to sign the papers right now?" "Yes, of course. Let's go," I replied. Fortunately, the drive only took a few minutes. It was 80 degrees outside, a nice warm breeze was blowing, and gentle waves were splashing on the beach. The day was perfect, as it always is. James and I sat at the bar while the outgoing owner gave us a detailed tour of the establishment. He laid out a few papers with financial statements as well as existing contracts with food and beverage vendors. Honestly, I let James handle most of it. I looked at the water and realized it was perfect. My friend had convinced me to put down roots, even if it was just a tiki hut-like bar on the beach. I would still live on a yacht, but I would enjoy the rest of my life here. I looked at James. He was smiling, shaking the salesman's hand. It would be good for him too. He had a hard time before he came here. What's more, he'd had a hard time after he got here. The whole ex-wife thing, the plane crash in the storm. I was beginning to think he was a cat with 9 lives, or maybe he was just good at life like MacGyver. He was in love with Tanya, though. That much was obvious. I think he was a little jittery after what his ex-wife had done to him, but overall they seemed like a happy couple. I was glad to see them enjoying each other's company as they both meant a lot to me. James was like the son I never had. I could have had more children if I hadn't screwed up so badly and cancer hadn't taken my love. Everything would have been so different. "Howard!" yelled James again. "Damn it, are you back on Earth yet?" he asked, laughing. "Yeah, sorry, just daydreaming. What did you say?" "You've been doing that a lot lately, are you okay?" "Just tired, sorry," I replied unconvincingly. "I was trying to tell you that it's your turn to sign if you still want to do it," he stated. I cleared my throat and nodded. "Yeah, I still want to. Where do I sign again?" He pointed to a line on the last page, and I put my best John Hancock signature I was capable of. When we finished signing, Jeff, the outgoing owner, showed us around. He jokingly introduced us to another employee who was working at the time, Kelly Peterson. We had visited the place many times before, so we knew most of the employees and considered them friends. In addition to Kelly, there were 2 other employees, Samantha Montgomery, who helped serve the bar in the evenings, and Jacob Paulson, who was in the kitchen during lunch and dinner. Jeff's wife, Patricia, often stopped by the restaurant, too. "Kelly, guess what?" I asked jokingly. "Oh my God, Howard, now what?" she moaned back. I chuckled. Kelly was one of my favorites. She always knew how to take a shit and immediately fight back. Honey, you work for me now. She had a huffed look on her face and lowered her forehead onto her hands. Jeff. How could you? In the world? James came to her rescue. Hey, Kelly, don't listen to that old fool. He's only a co-owner. Great, so now I have two pervy old bosses? She asked, lifting her head from the bar and laughing. I can't fucking win, can I? A hurt James asked. His hurt look lasted about 10 seconds, after which he and I broke out into a friendly laughter. Running this place with James is going to be a lot of fun. He really has become a lot like the son I never had in many ways. Kelly, could you be a doll and make James and I each a beach pineapple, please? I asked. Are we going to have to add that to the official drink menu now? She asked. Well, we need an official drinks menu first, James added, laughing. Jeff was always too good for that. Jeff didn't comment on anything, but gave James a middle finger salute. I'd always liked Jeff. Guess we should give it a new name, huh? I remarked. What? This unofficial drink? I thought you already called it the beach pineapple, Kelly asked. No, silly, the bar. I can't imagine James and I running an establishment called Jeff's Shack. How about you, James? Would you like to run Jeff's Shack? No thanks. You see, we need a new name. Does anyone have any ideas? I asked. Kelly groaned and Jeff just laughed. You guys are idiots. You're the old beach bum, and that one over there, she pointed at James, is just a lucky guy. At this point, Tanya walked over and gave James a hug. She acted as if they had been separated for a whole year, the way she snuggled up to him. In a way, I was happy for them. But at the same time, I felt a deep sadness at the daily reminder of what I had lost. Naturally, I tipped the rest of my drink into myself and stood up. Where do you think you're going, Howard? Tanya asked. Asked Tanya. I just got here. I grumbled unhappily, but obediently sat back down. That woman was quite a piece of work. James was a very lucky man, and I felt lucky to have such good friends. I think you guys should name it after Howard, Tanya said. What, a bar named after Howard? That sounds stupid, I replied. No, it should be Beach Bums, she said, laughing. I think we should vote for it. All in favor of Beach Bum? Asked James to the group. Everyone but Jeff raised their hands. He raised his hands when James threw a hard stare at him. What? He said. We're going to retire from here. I say the name sounds great, but it doesn't really matter what I think. I'm flattered, I muttered. I still find it funny that you think I'm a slacker, I laughed. Okay, shall we stay with Beach Bum then? Asked James. Howard, how did you end up in Hawaii anyway? I don't think I've ever heard that story, said James. Naturally, James turned the vote into a story. Sometimes I hate James. Most of the time. Okay, as long as I'm not sober, we get along just fine. Why do you think I drink so much? I replied. I really didn't feel like talking about it. See, now you have to tell us, said Kelly, very excited. Knowing my friends, they would hound me until I told them another story. Let's just say I've had a lot of bad shit, and I've decided to put it all behind me. Nope, you're not getting off that easy, James teased. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. Next chapter. After I lost my wife and my daughter practically abandoned me, I found myself in an emotionless sea. I worked, ate, slept, and did it all over again. Weekends went pretty much the same except for Sunday. On that day, I would go to the nearest church and pray for forgiveness. I wasn't a very religious person, but I felt I owed it to Ellen. There was no way I could make up for the terrible things I had done, no way I could atone for my sins. Sitting in the pew, I experienced no spiritual enlightenment, but continued to go there out of some perverted sense of duty. The only thing I got out of it was a constant feeling of guilt. I couldn't stop blaming myself for my sweet Ellen giving in. About a year after Clarissa moved out, I hit rock bottom. My parents were always upset whenever I was around and still blamed me for ruining a beautiful family. My daughter never got in touch with them either. Or if she did, they never told me about it. I know they loved me, but the few times I talked to my mom on the phone, it was always the same. Frustration. Mom, I was thinking about coming to visit you for Thanksgiving this year, I tried one cold October evening. Well, I guess we could cook a turkey or something together. It's just too bad you'll be alone again, she replied sadly. I know. Believe me, I know. You know I'd give anything to have it all back, don't you? There was silence in the receiver for a moment. Mom? A sniffle was heard. Yes, honey, I'm here. I just miss them. The phone went off. I could swear I heard her start to sob before hanging up. This was my life. I had a daughter who didn't want to see me anymore, and parents who couldn't talk to me anymore. I was a constant reminder to them of everything I had messed up. I ended up moving in with them, and over the course of a year we came to an understanding. I had screwed up, and we all knew it, but we had to get on with our lives. By then, my daughter was being sought by 2 private investigation firms. I wasn't going to get involved in her life, but I loved her too much to just forget about her. They first tracked her to a college in California, but apparently she dropped out after her first semester. It was another full year before they found anything else. She got pregnant and dropped out to become a mother. I was a grandfather. After reading their printed report, I drank my glass and made another. In no time at all, I was drunk. Here I was a 43-year-old widower, and now I was a grandparent? I was once again overcome with longing for the family I no longer had. I became addicted to the bottle. I only had a few friends at the time. Their names were Jameson, Glenfiddich, McAllen, and of course Jim and Jack in the evenings at the bar. Next chapter. So did you talk to her? Kelly asked, now very interested in my story. I sighed. Yeah, I talked to her. After I found out she had a baby, I wanted to try again. But I knew that before I tried, I'd have to clean up my act. That meant no more drinking. Ha 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 ha, James laughed. We all know how that turned out, he continued with a smile, pointing to the filled glass in front of me. Fuck you, sir, I said, laughing along with him. After a minute, everyone calmed down. I decided enough was enough and tried to sober up. I went to my doctor, and they referred me to rehab. His nurse at the time was a beautiful woman named Catherine. To make a long story short, I asked her out and she said yes. Now I know you're full of shit. There's no way a pretty nurse would agree to go out with you, Tanya laughed, joining the conversation. Yeah, it happens every day, right? Agreed Kelly. Seriously, she was very beautiful, and after a year of dating, she became my wife. I love that woman unconditionally, I replied calmly. Everyone stopped laughing and an eerie silence descended upon us. This was where my story was to continue. It was time to end the confession. Next chapter. That doctor's visit turned out to be one of the most important moments in my life. The doctor gave me several recommendations for programs I could enroll in, and also advised me to see a psychologist about my personal problems. Most importantly, I found the courage to ask Catherine out, and she said yes. I hadn't been with a woman since I last went out with Candace, so long ago. After being exposed, my now vanished wife never returned to my bed. Candace decided to quit and take a job at another company. Honestly, it wasn't that I missed having fun, although I had that too, but rather that I hadn't been intimate with anyone in a very long time. I remember our second date when we were sitting in a nice Italian restaurant talking about our lives. So, do you prefer to be called Howie or Howard? She asked me. Oh, tough questions, huh? I replied. Okay, let's put it this way. I prefer to be called Howard, but my close friends used to call me Howie. Used to? She asked, catching my wording. Long story. What about you? I tried to look away. She glared at me. Okay, I'll leave it at that for now, but eventually you'll tell me the story. Fair enough, I reassured her. I really didn't want to scare her off too quickly. I prefer to be called Katie. Catherine sounds too formal, like a nanny from the 1920s. I still scold my parents for that. You're too pretty to be a stuffy old nanny, I teased. She blushed. Thanks. You don't look too bad yourself, she smiled. That night we did it. I fell in love with her, and eventually by our fourth date, she did get the whole long story out of me. I was in tears when I confessed my past to her. For the first time in years, I felt connected to someone again. I proposed to her and she said yes. We got married and enjoyed every minute we spent together. She told me about her childhood, overbearing parents, and tumultuous college days. As a nurse, Katie worked crazy hours, but we made it work. We discussed it many times, but at our age, we weren't interested in having kids. She loved kids and sometimes worked with them at work. She tried to help me in my endeavor to reunite with Clarissa, but it wasn't meant to be. When Clarissa's daughter was about 2 years old, I felt I had mended enough to try to contact her again. It was the most nerve-wracking time I can ever remember. I sent her a long letter trying to explain how upset I was about letting her and her mother down like that. I tried to tell her that I wanted to be a part of her life again, and I still loved her very much. By this point, I had created my own little shrine to her in a spare room in the house, and Katie was helping me with the collage. About a month after I sent my letter, I received a reply. She sent me a very succinct letter that I still have in a box. I can still see the tear stains on the paper. Some of them were mine, and some were obviously left before the letter was sent. I know you were my father, but I wonder if I ever really knew you. When I was growing up, you were always there to pick me up in times of need. I counted on you to be there for me. After everything that happened, who was I supposed to turn to for help? You? That's what you took from me. You took my father away from me. I miss him. No. If you love me even a little bit, you'll never contact me again. Next chapter. Wow. I'm so sorry, Howard, James said. I could tell by the look in his eyes that he understood my pain. Yeah, the one thing I wanted more than anything in my life never happened. On top of that, it was right before my dad had a stroke and was placed in a nursing home. He couldn't take care of himself anymore, and my mom was getting too old. Then I talked to my mom, and at least we came to an understanding. She finally realized that it was partly her own fault that we weren't close anymore. I mean, I know it was my fault for cheating on my wife, but my mom apologized for not being there for me, her son. It was a very difficult time in my life. Okay, before you go any further, everyone needs a fresh batch of stiff drinks, Sean exclaimed loudly as he approached us. Everyone broke into laughter due to the fact that Sean was always present in the group. He was a friend of James, a mechanic, and had followed him to the islands some time ago. Sean and I became fast friends, except for the fact that he liked Kentucky bourbon. I'd long ago forgiven him for his terrible taste. Kelly served the drinks and Sean went behind the bar and made his own. Bourbon on the rocks. Lots of bourbon. In a beer mug. I like Sean a lot. As he stepped back to leave behind the bar, he went behind Kelly and grabbed her hips as he passed her. Careful, Sean. My boyfriend might have to kick your ass, she warned, laughing. Yeah, I'll be sure to watch out for that, he replied, leaning over her shoulder to kiss her. So, this one guy was hitting on me at the bar, she joked. Everyone laughed, knowing that Kelly and Sean had been together for almost a month by then. Initially, these two seemed like a very unlikely couple, but it worked out for them, and amazingly so. However, that's another story for another time. I cleared my throat and continued, getting everyone's attention again. Later that year, my father had another stroke. He didn't survive the second attack, and it just crushed my mother. She and I talked at the funeral, and I realized that she was going to follow him very soon. She wasn't physically ill, but you could tell her will to live had faded. They really weren't a bad couple, I said, staring into the void on the mirrored wall behind the bar. Next chapter. On Thanksgiving Day, before my dad had his stroke, Katie and I drove over to my mom and dad's house. We had a nice dinner, and I enjoyed the feeling of having family again. Howard, Kathy, we're so glad you're both here, Mom said. Thank you. It means a lot to me too, Kathy said. My parents are probably somewhere in central Montana right now. Kathy's parents are enjoying their retirement in an RV, I explained. Dad started to chuckle. That's what I keep threatening your mom with, but she's adamant that we're not going anywhere. Mom just looked at him, and they both giggled at some personal joke. Dad took Mom's hand and they shared a quick kiss on the lips. They always did things like that, even when I was a little boy. After everything that had happened, it was nice to see it again. Katie and I looked over at each other and, imitating our parents, kissed. Next chapter. That was the last time we enjoyed a meal together. After that, Dad had his first stroke and we never got together as a family again, until the funeral. So what happened after the funeral? What happened to Katie? James asked, pointing out the obvious. I was no longer married. That, my boy, is another long story. Let's get something to eat first, huh? I asked. Kelly and Jeff took over the small kitchen and we had an impromptu fish fry. The fish was lightly seasoned and batter-fried coleslaw. They had hash browns and fries on the side and sliced fresh honeydew melon. We had another portion each, and the fish was excellent, filling my empty stomach. Yep, we should make this a weekly event, don't you think? Asked James. That's actually not a bad idea, agreed Tanya. I know I'd love it. Then it's settled, announced James. Everyone was enjoying their food and drinks, but I knew I would have to finish my story soon. I tried to remember where I left off. Next chapter. My mom died just a few months after my dad. I was taking their loss hard and was head over heels in my work. A week after my mom died, my parents' attorney and I sat down to discuss their inheritance. As an only child, I had inherited almost everything from them. They had set aside 10% of their estate to be used to establish a college fund in their name. The rest went to me. I was already earning pretty good money, but after receiving the inheritance, I didn't have to worry about money anymore. The net amount after taxes and paying off all debts was just under $112 million. I had no idea they were that rich. Suddenly, Kathy and I were multimillionaires, and we had a long conversation about our future. She confessed that although she loved her job, she didn't want to work anymore. Instead, Katie decided to volunteer at a charitable organization for homeless and low-income families. This place was truly amazing in what it did for these poor people. Kathy was really able to make a difference in people's lives, and if it made her happy, it made me happy too. She was such a good person that I was proud to be her husband. A few months after I got the money, I started to hold down a job and was ready to retire. Eventually, I took my wife's advice and set up a college fund for Clarissa. We had a lawyer friend draft a formal letter stating that it was an inheritance from her grandparents. Of course, my name was not mentioned. This began my silent help to her and her family. I don't know exactly at what point things took a turn for the worse, but I do remember that Kathy and I began to socialize less with each other. She spent more time with her new socialite friends. She became more involved in the charity organization she was volunteering for. It got to the point where she was selected for a leadership position. I was very proud of her, but it ended up taking up a lot of her time. When she had to go out of town for charity events, I traveled with her as often as I could. There were a few times when I didn't go for various reasons. At those times, I had no reason to worry about anything. Next chapter. On one of those trips, I found out that my wife was having an affair, I said. Several sighs followed as I continued. I was stuck in the past again, but the problem I was dealing with resolved itself very quickly. Cliché, I know, but I went to surprise her and caught them in the act. The details aren't important, but suffice it to say it was the end of our marriage. Money really ruined the beautiful person she once was. After a moment's silence, All James could say was, "Wow." I continued. So, she broke my heart and I had to leave. She was seeing a young guy on the side and had the nerve to tell me that he was better strung and could last longer than me. When the divorce was final, she got $2 million of my inheritance, but the rest was left to me. My parents asked us both to sign a prenup, given their wealth. I was against it at first, but Kathy, ironically, agreed. I'm sure when we first met, she never thought she'd do what she did. So you're saying that money made her cheat? Bullshit, Sean declared. No, I'm saying that all the money ended up ruining her. She was no longer the kind and gentle woman I fell in love with. I was just too blind at the time to notice it. She's changed, and I blame it on the money, I replied with some anger in my voice. Okay, I get it, Sean said, raising his hands in defeat. It's just that I had my own memories. Anyway, I was traveling for a while. Nothing could distract me from thinking about losing her. I bought the Purgatory when I felt I needed to get far away. I chartered a carriage to take me around the world, and after about 2 years, I ended up here. I finished. There was an awkward silence, and then I heard the clinking of glass. I looked over at James, who was grinning like a fool, holding something behind his back. Why the hell are you so smug? I asked, grumbling like the old man I was. No reason, he replied, moving in front of me. At that moment, Kelly came out from behind the bar, holding a small cake with a lit candle on top. The band started playing the damn song. I hate them. When they finished, they looked at me expectantly. Oh shit. As James would probably say, Hakuna Matata. Like a dummy, I blew out the candle. Naturally, my wish remained a secret. Thanks, everyone. It means a lot to this old man, I managed to say before my throat caught. Happy birthday, Howard, James said, handing me a present. It was the very thing I had been looking for, but had such a hard time finding. The box was very matte black, with an embossed logo and the number 50 on the front. It was a 50-year-old Glenfiddich whiskey, rare collection. The cost of the bottle was almost $40,000. You did it? You found it? Incredulously, I asked. Yes, I had to resort to a few favors, but I found her, James replied. Thank you. I don't care how you did it, but thank you, my friend. Thank you all. I looked around at my group of friends, all of them smiling at me, and felt a peace I hadn't known in a very long time. I was with my family. We were enjoying a small cake, joking around while we ate. Seriously, there's no way we could have put up as many candles as we needed to cover your age, Sean exclaimed. Screw you, sir, replied I, using the time-honored tradition of swearing back. Sorry, you're too old for me, Sean brushed it off. I couldn't help it. I started roaring with laughter. Everyone was laughing too, and it was wonderful to have such great friends. Eventually, people started to leave. We parted ways, and I went back to my boat. The night was so wonderful that I didn't even drink for the rest of the evening and went to bed early. It was the first truly restful sleep I've had in a long time. Next chapter. And then, Howard, you have to tell me about your time on the water, Sean said again a few weeks later. My friend, I will tell you those stories, but not tonight, I replied. He demanded details from me about the time I bought my boat. There were a few sad moments spent in exotic ports when I wished I had done it with my wife's ex-wife. Maybe if I had spent more time with her, she wouldn't have lost her way. I guess I'll never understand that. There were some happy and even fun times, though. Those were the stories I'm sure he wanted to hear. I guess I can tell you one, I surrendered. He just smiled, raised his glass, and saluted me. That Saturday night, I felt like I had something to share with him. You see, after about 6 months of traveling, I stopped in Rio de Janeiro. It's one of the most exciting places I've ever been. Never been, Sean replied. His look spoke volumes, as if to say, do I really look like I can afford a trip to Rio? Sorry. I just remember it like it was just yesterday. There was some magic there for me. I felt the same way here in Hawaii. It's the main reason I decided to stay here forever. So you're staying in Rio? Asked Sean. Yeah. Rio was a beautiful city, but the truly wonderful thing I found there was Teresa. She was able to renew my faith in humanity. I smiled as I remembered her face. Teresa? If she was so special, why isn't she here? She told me she had too much love for one life. She was very frank about herself. There wasn't a dishonest bone in her body. Basically, she was telling me she didn't want to settle down. Teresa was amazing, and within a week I felt like I had known her forever. I felt invigorated, but realized I had to leave Rio before I got too attached to her. Wow, was all he said, sipping his beer. Just then, James and Tanya appeared, laughing about something on the way to the bar. They sat down, and we all greeted each other. Another great day, eh, man? James joked. Joked James. Joked. Yeah, another day in paradise. James turned to Tanya. Seriously, aren't you upset that you didn't get cast in this role? No, not at all. If anything, right now I'm even more glad I didn't take it, she replied. What are you two talking about? About that movie you mentioned? Asked Sean. Yeah, it was the movie Backcountry. We watched it last night, and holy shit. I felt sorry for the heroine, Missy, but her boyfriend was an idiot. I was yelling at the screen the whole time, Tanya said. She did too, James added with a smile. But yeah, I sympathized with her, so she did a great job with her part. The guy, on the other hand, got the worst of it. Mostly, I just didn't want to do it. Now I'm happily doing voiceovers and more family stuff, Tanya replied. Where is he? Shouted someone behind us, nearly knocking me off my stool in surprise. Where? Who? Kelly asked from behind the bar. Howard Denton, shouted an angry female voice again. Okay, cool it, lady, asked Kelly. I'm right here, I replied, turning around. Time had stopped. This couldn't be happening. Why was she here? Clarissa? Gasped I, confused. Papa! She practically spat out, her voice full of venom. I blinked, not knowing what to do or say. I know my mouth was open like everyone else in the bar. I had to say something. What are you doing here? Did something happen? I honored your wish to never speak to you again. I finally found my voice. It's been killing me all these years, but I never tried to contact you after your letter. She stared at me like I had horns growing out of my head. What about she? She shouted, pointing at Tanya. As if time had stopped, it finally came to Tanya. Mom, what are you doing here? Why did you just call Howard, Dad? All eyes turned to me. I guess I owe you an explanation, huh? Clarissa continued to stare at me angrily and only nodded once. I looked around at all my friends and finally stopped my gaze on Tanya. It was time to come clean. Tanya came to me, but only because I was trying to help her financially. A few years ago, I helped fund a project she was working on, and she came to me to thank me. I tried so hard to stay out of your lives, but I just couldn't sit back and do nothing. You were still my little girl. You hurt me more than I could have ever imagined, Clarissa accused, tears welling up in her eyes. I lowered my head in shame. I know. I still miss her, you know. She was too good for me, I replied. I'll go to my grave regretting the pain I caused your mother. And you? There was silence until James coughed. I'm sorry, Howard. It's my fault she's here. I had no idea she was Tanya's mother. I tracked her down and sent her a letter about you. I tried to help you after you told us about her at your birthday party. Mom, this is the guy I told you about. That's James, Tanya said. Clarissa turned to James. The guy you said you were in love with? Honey, he's my age, she exclaimed. I know. He has a daughter who is almost my age. I don't care, and I hope you realize how important he is to me. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. This was the strangest situation I'd ever found myself in, aside from maybe when Ellen walked in on Candace and me. I came back to the present and looked at my daughter. My God, she was beautiful. So, Clarissa began, you are so beautiful. You remind me so much of your mother. I tried to say, but tears started running down my cheeks. All the anger left in Clarissa drained away. She sat down at the table next to us with a sad and defeated look. Her eyes were moist too. I looked around and didn't see any dry eyes. Suckers, I hate them all. Clarissa, I never stopped wanting to be a part of your life. I watched you, but I never interfered. I was at your college graduation after you went back to school. Being a young mother wasn't easy, but you did a great job. I was so proud of you. When Tanya was little, I tried to attend some of her activities too. When she was 8 years old, I hid in the back room during her dance recital. When you were elected mayor of your hometown, I kept a newspaper clipping with a picture taken during your speech. I also saw all the movies Tanya was in. How could I not? She's my granddaughter. I stopped, unable to continue. I cried. I cried like a little baby, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I felt arms wrap around me and squeeze me tightly. When I calmed down a little and opened my eyes, all my friends were already snorting and Tanya released me from her bear hug. I always wondered why you were interested in my career back then, she said. I'm so glad you're my grandfather. I hugged her tightly before we let go of each other. Tanya looked at her mother and waved her hand. Clarissa looked apprehensively, but then gave in and joined our hug. I missed you, Daddy. She wailed, becoming like my little girl again. That opened the floodgates in both of us again. I'm so sorry, I said. I'll never forgive myself, never. I've lost two of the most important things in the world to me, and I have no one to blame but myself. Next chapter. It hurt too much for me to realize that you lost your mom too. You weren't the one who gave her the cancer that killed her. I realize that now, Clarissa said grimly. I loved your mom very much, but I loved you too. My heart tore out of my chest the day I read your letter. I knew you were angry, but the fact that I contributed to all that pain... I said it, and my voice trailed off. Everyone went home and I offered her a cabin on my yacht for the night. As we approached the yacht, she noticed the name painted on the stern. Purgatory? She asked. The story of my life, I nodded. I told you I haven't forgiven myself, right? This time, she just nodded. We boarded and sat in the living room for a while, sipping our nightcaps. Clarissa sat there looking at me. What? I asked. I just can't believe everything that's happened. When I was younger, I thought you and Mom looked like a prince and princess. When I got older, I still thought you two were stupidly in love with each other. Why, Dad? Why did you do that? She asked. There is no easy answer to that question. I've asked myself that question 1,000 times over the past few decades. Was it her? Did your mom do something wrong? I assure you, your mom had nothing to do with it. I think that's what hurt us both the most. She was completely innocent. I became selfish and forgot why I loved her so much. I think I took it for granted that she would always be there for me. Why didn't you try to do everything you could to get her into treatment? She asked again with anguish in her quiet voice. I did everything I could think of. I begged her. I tried to bribe her by offering to leave. I offered her to get back at me with another man. I even begged her to see a grief counselor, but she had already lost her desire. It broke me. You know, 2 years after I got married, I tried to rebuild a relationship with you. Aaron, that's my husband, talked me into trying it. He said it wasn't good for me to keep the negativity inside. So I came home. You had moved out by then, and no one around here knew where you'd gone. I had no idea. After I sold everything, I moved here. I kept an eye on what you were doing, but I didn't follow you or anything. I never knew. Your last letter really hurt me, but I respected your wishes. We sat in silence for a while, mulling over the events of the day. Finally, she got up and, announcing that she was tired, went to bed. The next day, we spent almost 8 hours reconnecting. She told me about her husband, and we talked about Tanya. I told her about my marriage to Catherine and how it ended. Finally, we talked about the future and staying in touch with each other. After dinner, she packed up her things for an early morning flight home. We enjoyed dinner and were joined by James and Tanya. It really did feel like a family. The next morning was emotional for everyone. James kissed Tanya goodbye as she was flying to Australia to shoot a family movie. He was going to join her in a week, but such a long separation always makes them especially sentimental. Wimpy. Clarissa wept as she said goodbye to both Tanya and me. Be sure to call me when you land, I said. Now that she was back in my life, I didn't want it to ever end. I will, I promise. I have to visit your family for the holidays this year, I said. I'd love to. Bye, Daddy, she said, and we hugged one last time. My life was far from perfect, but I was feeling pretty good that night. As I prepared for bed, I quietly prayed to Ellen. I could only hope she heard me. Thank you for being my wife. I hope you are proud of the daughter you helped raise, and one day, I hope you will forgive me. I love you. I just hoped I could forgive myself. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.